all down here, all the way down toward Panther here on the shoreline here in San Antonio Bay. We've had a little bit of extra water that's been in here for the last few days, so it's been very helpful for us. There's been a lot of these areas in these back lakes that's lit up for us. That's done really well. Locating some fish back in these types of areas, like here, like in Oyster Bayou and Cottonwood Bayou, all these areas back in here. And with that extra water in there, if your boat's skinny enough to get back in some of these areas, and even with the extra water there, and you can get back in there and big brund it in these areas, and you kind of work your way back into areas that may not have been open to you for a while. So that said, we've been working these shorelines that are back in some of these areas. Lots of bait that's been pushed back in these. We've got scattered redfish, catching some decent trout that are in there mainly. An occasional black drum in some of these areas, but that's not what I'm primarily targeting back in here. I'm primarily looking for redfish and trout and seeing what we can locate in and around a lot of these little spoil islands that are back in these areas and all that kind of stuff there. So we're working in and out of these mouths, working these little back bays. Down here in Cottonwood, the same type of thing. You've got more little back lake mouths that are up and down the shoreline here in the San Antonio Bay area, all the way down to Panther. Lots of these areas have kind of opened up for us with the extra little push of water that we've had in the last few days. So it's been very helpful for us, and it's kind of giving us a little rejuvenation into the water column there. That's kind of perked it up. Water temps have climbed back up. We've gotten back into some pretty warm air temps, so therefore our water temps are going to follow that as well. We're looking 88, 89, 90 in some spots, and you get back in some of these lakes here, the little back lakes, there's got a little bit more mud in them, so you might be touching 91, maybe 92, depending on how much sunshine it gets on it. But it's not mattering too much. Redfish seem to be pretty active and frisky enough to want to play, so we're taking advantage of that. So again, topwater action has been very good for us. It's been moments there where we get those opportunities to get that big blow up in back of these areas here. So it's really good, especially if you get in some of these back lakes and you're not able to control your descent of your bait. Again, primarily thing that we're using is 16th ounce jig heads to allow that to work for us in these thigh to waist deep areas back in the back lakes or maybe out on the fronts, shoreline, these edges. Another area here in Panther Lake, and in the backside of Panther there you've got Swan Lake that's in here as well. So these areas lend itself to give you down the shoreline a little bit off these edges, some great pothole areas that you can work your topwater baits across these areas and throw that. Another thing that's starting to show up and starting to be productive for us is the soft dines, the smaller version. The Double D is another one. So that's just kind of a prelude to corky season's coming up here, probably another month and a half or 2 months. Once we get a first decent, really good cold front that comes in here and kind of drops our temps somewhat, maybe even pushes our water temps down some, we'll start to get some action with that will start showing up for us. So those days are not too terribly far away. So if you haven't seen those and looked at those baits out of your box in a while, you might want to get those out and maybe change hooks and get that kind of stuff ready to go here, because it'll be upon us before you know it. But that said, like I say, these areas here have really lit up for us. In the plastics in the down south, we've been throwing the white ice, bone diamond in the original and burner size, in the burner shad size, twisted tea, big papa have been all good colors. Watermelon red, Copperfield, of course, another one in the mud minnow, firecracker have all been good in burner shad flavors for that. For the knock and tail lure, heavy metal, greenbacks, rogue have all been good for us as well. White ice in that is too. And the knock and tail have been very good. All those flavors. Marker 54, the jerk shrimp has been steady. You can, like I say, that's a lot of different ways that you can work it. I like to free line it and just kind of work it off the shell and work it off these grass beds and pockets that are in and around some of these back lakes. You got some, like I say, you get really good pockets and potholes that are in some of these back lakes. So it's really a great spot to use that. You can just kind of work that along that grass line edge, and it's been very productive for us. Again, majors and minors have been a big thing for us. In and around those time frames have been very productive. Make sure that you're tracking when those time frames are taking place, so it gives yourself the best opportunity to catch. Now, again, we're fixing to get it. We're transitioning right now. We're in the wild card days, so make sure that you got a few different baits, sizes, profile, colors, so that you can attack it from all different angles if something's not really working that well. Full moon will be upon us here probably in another 4 to 5 days. So something to remember there, the smaller profile sizing around the full moons is always a productive thing to make sure that you can continue with your catching day. Up here on Dunham Island, down the shoreline here, all the way where the old ICW used to dump out. There's still the remnants of it are still there, so just be very aware. I know I've talked about this in the past before, but it's always just a nice reminder. If you're going to wade this area here off of this point here on the backside of Dunham, just remember that the ICW depth is still there. You know, you got a big reef that's on the opposite side of it. You got the shoreline that's opposite that. But if you tried to walk across it, you'd put yourself in a little bit of peril there, because there's some spots in through there that still dump off to 15 to 18 to 20 foot in some particular spots. So you don't really want to be able to deal with that. But with the warmer temperatures, this is not a terrible spot to want to prospect, especially off the edge of that. So you can get yourself where you're comfortable, where you can throw out to it and allow that bait to really kind of dive down off the edge of that. Now this would be one of those areas with the depth in that where you may want to change to an 1/8 ounce or maybe even a 3/16 ounce jig head here, so it allows you to get down on the edge of either side of the cut that comes through that a little bit faster, instead of just having a 1/16 ounce just be really slow falling down in there. It may not be what you want, but you can try it. Just a suggestion to be able to do that. You know, you got the shell that's on the opposite side of this, and you got a big shell bar that's here. It looks like a little starfish from the sky if you looked at it, and you can fish all inside of that. Lots of good mud that's in there, but there's good shell. There's been some decent fish that's been hanging in and around that. A lot of bait. So again, your bait source is always your number one priority, is to make sure that you have that. And then of course look at your structure and what you got going on for the time of year it is. Right now we're still wanting to be over hard packed sand, shell, and grass. Again, grass is always your number one common denominator, no matter what time of year it is. You always want some grass in areas that you're going to fish. Fish just love to have that kind of structure in and around them, so they can work off of it from being an ambush predator. Both redfish and trout are that way, even flounder to a point. They like that kind of stuff and like these kind of edges that work in and around here. So you can come on around as you get into Carlos, working the point here on the back side of that, all the way back down here on the shoreline here. Lots of good structure that's in here. You've got lots of edges. You've got everything that you need. You've got bait. You've got the right structure. You've got grass. Again, water depths have all been very good for us the last few days with the extra water pushing here. So it's kind of pushed fish up for us, especially redfish. It's been a little bit closer to the shorelines and where they have been over the weeks prior to this. So just to kind of give you a FYI there, just kind of locate and find yourself. If you're going to wade this particular area, get off in that, kind of get out there, because there's another edge that's a little bit further out. Depending on what the tides are, as far as how high they are, you may or may not be able to work that as, because it may be too deep to do it at the moment. Back when we were in our negative tides back in July and August and June, that was not a problem at all, because we had negative tides for so long that you could really work that outer edge on there, and you could be very productive with being in deeper water. So something just to be aware of, just working this shoreline all up and down here, and take your time with it. Again, the down south flavors have been very, very productive for us. Been the white ice and bone diamond. Twisted tea, big pop have always been those. Now in the burner shads, the other two flavors in the burner shad to add to that would be the white ice and bone diamond as well. Purple rain in that. Mud minnow's been very good for us in the burner shad. Depending on what the water clarity is, firecracker can be good, or supernatural in the burner shad's another very good flavor as well. So just, you got a different choices there. Again, especially in these wild card days, you may want to start out with something a little bit smaller and then kind of expand off of that and just kind of see what the fish are dictating to you. Again, the knock and tail have been the flavors, white ice in that, the rogue, heavy metal, greenback, all four of those flavors have been very good for us. This is another good area for the marker 54, the jerk shrimp there with that harder bottom there and that scattered grass. You can really work that bait, just kind of bouncing it in and around that grass and not getting hung up with it. But it can be very productive for you. Not so much top water in here. hasn't been as good as it has been in other areas, so we've kind of really stuck to our plastic games and really work in these areas. And again, majors and minors, the number one key factor for us in and around these bite frames that we've located and found fish consistently. Up here in the turtle pen area, from Shell Point, this whole shoreline, very easily wading. You've got back lake mouths that dump off into this. You've got structure that's in here. You've got some nice, a little bit softer mud or a little bit softer sand, if you will, a little scattered grass in here. It kind of sets it up really good. Again, with the more water that we've had in here the last few days, back in here has been very good for us. Now, when you get back off in this back part of Turtle Pen, this little section back here, you've got some really good back lake mouths that can lend itself to have fish holding in the mouth or maybe back up in the little back lake areas for that. But the one thing that you want to be aware of if you're going to wade up into those is those mouths back in here, they get really soft back up in it. So just be aware of that, because it can be, you know, knee to thigh to crotch deep in some of these areas back here in some mud, and you don't really want to put yourself in a bad spot, especially if you're fishing by yourself. So just kind of be aware of that. Just get to where you're comfortable wading these areas like that, and just kind of keep that in mind, that it gets softer as you get further up there. So you just may have to make a longer cast to get up into it to give you some potential opportunities that come out of some of these areas. Now, this whole back shoreline, all the way up toward Copano Creek, through the little gut that's through here in this little back lake area here, the back shoreline. If you want to run your boat all the way back up in there, you can, depending on what kind of tide we've had. But again, like I've said, the last few days we've had much more water in our system than we have typically had in the weeks previous to that. So it's kind of opened that up for us to give us those opportunities. On the outside of these edges that are on this outside here have been pretty good for us. A little bit deeper water. There's been some fish consistently holding in and around some of these particular areas. You just kind of have to prospect and work. This is where our top water baits kind of worked for us pretty well. We can throw in there and see if we get some opportunities, at least, you know, some blow-ups or maybe some follows or something to that effect, some slaps, some swirls. And if they're really not wanting to attack it or be with it, then we can switch over to our plastics. Or if you've got somebody with you or a couple of people with you that's got plastics and somebody's throwing a top water, throw in behind them. That's always a very effective tactic to be able to do, because those fish, if they're really not wanting to come to a commit to a top water bait, then they'll see that plastic kind of floating down in front of their face and give them a great opportunity to want to eat that. So like I say, we've just been working the edges out here, a little bit deeper water, especially a little bit later into the morning times. Again, our water temps are still warm. You know, air temps are still warm. We haven't received our first really good cold front just yet, but I would imagine probably here in the next month and a half, we will receive one somewhere in that time frame. And that will change things. That will start making things head toward a different direction as far as what these fish are going to want to do. They'll start to feel a little bit of change in the water, in the temps of the water, and that will start to put them in a different kind of pattern. But for now, we're still full-blown summertime pattern, working the edges, working grass, working shale, hard-packed sand. Again, the main thing that you want to be able to do is locate your food source, make sure that you got a good food source that's working in the area, and then make sure that you got the right kind of structure that we're working over in and around, and then just be patient and work the waters. You know, if you've got 2 or 3 people, then it makes it easier. Everybody can put on something a little bit different as far as profile size and colors to see if you can narrow something down a little bit quicker. If you're fishing by yourself, then just kind of go with the transition days coming, our wild card days, and the full moon that's fixing to be upon us here in the next few days. Go with the smaller profile and just let that kind of take its place and do its thing, and just kind of work and be aware of that, and make sure that you're fishing the majors and minors in and around these time frames so you can continue to locate and find your fish.